Hi, and welcome to Finding Your Way Through Therapy. I am your host, Steve Bisson. I'm an author and mental health counselor. Are you curious about therapy? Do you feel there is a lot of mystery about therapy? Do you wonder what your therapist is doing and why? The goal of this podcast is to make therapy and psychology accessible to all by using real language and straight-to-the-point discussions. This podcast wants to remind you to take care of your mental health, just like you would your physical health. Therapy should not be intimidating. It should be a great way to better health. I will demystify what happens in counseling, discuss topics related to mental health, and discussions you can have with your therapist. I also want to introduce psychology in everyday life, as I feel most of our lives are enmeshed in psychology. I want to introduce the subtle and not so subtle ways psychology plays a factor in our lives. It will be my own mix of thoughts as well as special guests. So join me on this discovery of therapy and psychology. Hi, and welcome to episode 54 of Finding Your Way Through Therapy. If you haven't listened to episode 53 yet, please do so. Jay Ball and Caitlin Dehe, again, very great guests. Third time in 3 seasons that I've had both of them. Jay has been since season 1. I do hope that you take time to listen to our conversation about mental health, first responders, the change in co-response model, maybe even differences with CIT. But I do hope that you enjoy that conversation. But episode 54 will be with another returning guest, Mr. Pat Rice. Pat Rice has the top 2 most popular episodes of my podcast, and there's good reasons for that because Pat is a very interesting guy. Pat has been a friend of mine for several years, and we're really 2 peas in a pod sometimes. And we certainly have enjoyed talking about different things, but hopefully this time we're going to talk a little bit about shamanistic stuff. We're going to talk about maybe some psychopharmaceutical use in regards to that, as well as someone who's reconnected. He was saying, oh, I want to bring that up. And I'm like, all right, well, we'll talk about it. And I obviously told him that he's, again, a popular guy, and I'm sure we're going to joke about that. So here is episode 54. Well, hi, and welcome to episode 54 of Finding Your Way Through Therapy. I am Steve Bisson, and we're also recording for YouTube. I've told you about my YouTube channel. If you don't know yet, just go to it, and I'll give a link. This will be the 4th episode on YouTube, and Pat was generous enough to do so. But Pat Rice is someone we've had here for episode 32, 43, 54. Sounds like there's a good symmetry going there. So I think we're going to keep up that symmetry, but wanted to welcome back Pat Rice, who has the number 1 and number 2 all-time downloads on my podcast. And so there's no pressure, Pat, but you just got to keep on going forward.
I'm merely an instrument of greater beings, and so I know they feel no pressure, so I can't either. So, but it's an honor to be back, and the first one with video. I'm glad I put a clean shirt on. You know?
Yeah, I've got my clean shirt on because I knew it, so you know I kind of had you beat on that one.
I'll give credit for one thing for the background because I get sick of looking at the pictures behind me in the office. That's a picture taken, I believe, by my friend Annie Galvin, who retired, who's a wonderful clinician that retired to Maine. And she and her daughter, Allie Renee, I steal a lot of her great shots too, is that they're climbing mountains. They may be doing the 4,000 peak, 4,000 foot summit group of mountains that people do. Amazing pictures that they take when they get to the top. So this is one of those shots. I think it's a dawn where they climb a mountain pre-dawn and then they get to the top to enjoy the sunrise. So,
and if anyone wants to see more pictures like that, I know you always put them on your Instagram account.
That's right. I use them for the backgrounds for a lot of the memes that I do, and which come from when I meditate in the morning. Sometimes I get a thought or whatever, and there's always Buddha always has had the thought first. So there's generally some Buddhist quote that kind of fits that thought.
So you meditate every morning?
Yep.
Wow. And do you do it at night also, just in the morning?
No, I fall asleep at night. I'm old. I get I wake up at 4:30 in the morning, ready to go. But at 8:30 at night, I'm done. I say to people that would like to talk to me about something important, and in the evening I said I'm not responsible for what I'd say. So it's just that That happened to me actually in my practice. Someone I saw for many, many years at 6:30 at night after their work. Her schedule changed. This one I changed everything because he used to work nights. We all worked nights in the beginning. And she says, "Is there any way you could see me at like 7:30 in the morning before I go to work? Because I got a new job and a new commute and all that." I said, "Sure, let's give it a shot." And 5 minutes into the session, she stopped me and she said, "Oh my God, you're awake." She said, "In the evening, she'll hear this too. I'll send this to her. She'll hear this and she'll know who she is." But she said to me, she said, "Oh my goodness, you've always been empathic and everything, but this more, you're with me now. You're with me. You're right." And that's when I changed to a daytime practice. And now it's almost exclusively morning practice, which is why you're up in the middle of the night to do this podcast with me.
Yeah, for me, this is really, really early, but
pushing the envelope.
I'm a night owl. I was watching hockey last night till 11:30 midnight. And I'm like, oh, I got to go to bed. I got to talk to Pat tomorrow morning. So we are different animals, just like anything else, but in some ways complementary. And I think that's
absolutely. And I was a night owl for many, many years too. And things just shifted. A lot of it is neurological. You go back into from more of an adolescent, early adult melatonin cycle into one more like little ones. And we all go back to everything. Hopefully you leave before you have to go back into diapers. So it's part of the cycle of life. But meditation is actually easy when you're used to it. It's like anything. If you're going to the gym 6 days a week, you just go to the gym. If you take books out of the library, you don't even know about Amazon. You just go to the library and get books. Whatever we do, we're good at repetition, which is a wonderful thing or an awful thing. And that's kind of the yin and yang of it all. So, but I recommend it to anybody. Meditate early in the morning. Get a cup of coffee, sit down with a coffee, and just breathe. It's actually so easy. It's so simple. And everyone makes such a big deal of, oh my God, you got to get the thing and the puja and the thing and the lotus position and the chin mudra. No, you just need to sit in a comfortable place, comfortable clothing, and let the universe bathe down on you. That's all. Just be.
And it doesn't even have to be in the morning because I'm a night meditator.
You can. Absolutely. You can.
And
yeah.
I get my bedtime routine. That is part of my bedtime routine. Mm-hmm. It's almost like my body getting ready to go to sleep. Mm-hmm. You say you fall asleep. For me, it's kind of like a way to just calm my body down and actually start like almost a sleep cycle before I get to my sleep cycle.
But it's also, I use an awful lot just to block external noise out. I'll use tapes of the different solfeggio frequencies that basically respond to different chakras in the body and heal. It's all frequency. Behind me, maybe you can see it now, is a...
Oh, you got your bowl, your singing bowl.
Yeah, it's a quartz bowl. That's a perfect F, which is the heart chakra, which one of my teachers had this in her office and insisted that I get one as well, because that's where most of damage was done in my emotional being and my histories and all of that. And these are powerful things. They're energy. Everything we talk about here reverts back to energy, whether it's shamanism or spirit or whatever. It's all about energy. Everything that is around us comes from energy, and we exchange energy. That's why the brain is a mystery to us as to how it works. We barely know 15, 20% of how the brain works, but what is consciousness? That is something that is more of the spirit field, if you will, or quantum field, than it is of this four-dimensional existence that we see in front of us. And it's funny, we talk about yin and yang and absolutes and infinity and all of these things and eternity and how big is the universe, all of these imponderables. But when you think about it, it could very well be that we have one absolute, and it's an energetic absolute in our physical universe, and that's the speed of light. That seems to be one of those limits to everything. But everything comes from light. If light is a source of all energy, we start to then see that this is just the beginning of a journey. And we are curious beings. And We spend so much time at least in our civilization, Western civilization, studying things, looking at things and about things, physical things, and more of the Aboriginal spiritual beings. They saw more of what was in, where we
Right.
came from, so that's how the Aboriginal, when we think of Aborigines, often in this country, we think of Australian Aborigines, so the original natives to that continent. And they'll sit out there in a loincloth and with very little, probably in a desert setting, looking very primitive. And yet they are probably far more evolved than are we. I'll speak a little bit later to a friend I reconnected with, extraordinary healer and human being in Maine, and what her sense of this place we're in and who our greatest teachers are here. It will surprise you. It probably won't. It probably won't surprise you, Steve. And she wrote a wonderful book about it as well. So we'll talk about Kerry a little bit later. So if we think about it, it's all about energy. Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think that we can go in right away about Kerry. The one thing I want to mention is Reiki is something that I practice myself. I am a Reiki practitioner. I am not a teacher. And yesterday we had a get together in my office, and a lot of people asked me questions about Reiki and how it works and all that. I think that that's what I can't remember Joe's name. There's a book I'm reading right now, and it talks about how energy is something that people can't see, so they struggle with it. But when all reality, you don't see oxygen, you don't see the sun, you don't see a lot of the energy that's out there. So why wouldn't we be connected through energy?
Well, it's also in what do we have faith? And I don't understand electricity, even though I was studying at one time to be a physicist. I don't really understand it. Okay, electrons bouncing along a wire and saying, I don't know. However, I have the faith to have this device plugged in. I have my cell phone being charged right now by this mysterious force. So if you're looking, as we do in the recovery movement, for higher power, very often it can be electricity. Actually, there's the arcane literature of Alcoholics Anonymous talks about that as a concept of if you can believe in electricity, you can believe in a higher power. It doesn't have to be something that we consider more of as a Judeo-Christian or other type of deity. Deities were created by human beings to try to get a sense of what they couldn't understand, whether it's a pantheistic view or, I know a fellow from Nepal who says, I have hundreds of gods and goddesses, and you're stuck with just one. But I'm going to show, because we have a camera now, if people are out there and they're interested in either Reiki and they don't know much about it, or shamanism, here's one-stop shopping right here.
Oh, wow. So it says for those on podcasts, Reiki Shamanism, a guide to out-of-body healing, and it's by Jim Pathfinder, I believe.
Yeah, Jim Pathfinder Ewing.
So for those of you on YouTube, you can see it. Otherwise, I wanted to say it out loud for
Reiki
those on
Shamanism.
The podcast.
That's it. It's a book. It's a fairly new book. It's let's see, when is it? This is one of the things that I every now and again just pick up. It was 2008, so it's still in print. But it's kind of one-stop shopping for anyone who's curious about it, explaining Reiki in a very, very secular way. There's no real, how shall I say, occult language. This is just really practical stuff, and explaining how the use of the Reiki energy, that source of energy, is done. It's done symbolically and other things that kind of generate this or attract this energy through the practitioner, through us. Many of my patients, so as I said, well, you give it to your children. I'll call it Reiki mommy love. You hold them, you love them, you give them your being, give them everything that is important to you as you hold them and soothe them and all of that. It's the same stuff. It's just that you haven't had a formal attunement. You do it intuitively with your pets and your children. In the worst form of it, it's a form of codependency, probably, but we won't go there because you care so much that it can hurt. But you can take that hurt and translate it into a loving presence and a loving energy.
Right.
It's a funny thing. I've said many a time when people say, well, you're a Reiki master, what do you do? I say, well, I don't really do hands-on Reiki very often. I work with so much trauma that it wasn't appropriate in my practice.
Right.
when you really need very rigid boundaries, especially being a white male. And it's female nurses over the years. I worked with many of them, extraordinary people. They could touch and hold and hug children and things like that, which I couldn't do because of the natural boundary, especially with her children. It's a funny thing, when I reconnected with my friend Kerry Keegan, I knew her many years ago. I knew her whole family, but she was special to me. We were pals, and she was a bit younger than I, but we worked together. And we'd go every noontime and swim. And it was like riding in my big gold Cadillac down to Portland from Yarmouth, Maine. And we'd swim laps every day, the YW or whatever. We'd just chat. And we'd work together in different shifts and things like that. But we were always pals. It was one of those special relationships. And as life would have it, I disappeared when I got sober and just disappeared. I literally ran for my life from a place I'd lived for 2 decades. And we reconnected around this podcast, actually.
Really?
It's
that would
kind
be
of
pre-interview, but it might be nice for
it
everyone.
was. I kind of reconnected with her because of she is a healer, a remarkable healer, and I ran into something on. There's a group in Maine, Soul Connection, or forgive me for not knowing exactly what it is. But it's a consortium. It's kind of like an online consortium of energy healers and whatever. And I saw that she was a part of that. And then I started to get curious. So before I contacted her, I basically just started vetting her and chasing and seeing what she was doing. And then we were supposed to have a meeting the other day. I was going to go to Maine and I couldn't. So we did a Zoom call, as we do. As she says, I Zoom all over the world with my clients. So she told me something that I've said many a time, just in my own understanding, is that my use of Reiki, I always saw it to attach to words and metaphor in my practice, so that my words that I'm trying to help somebody would have more power, more authentic healing ability. That's all. It's just, please make me useful.
Right.
That's basically the prayer, if you will. Just let me be helpful and useful to somebody. And in doing that, over the years, I'd hear myself, someone asked me a question and I'd just give it a shot. Well, do I have an answer or an opinion? Well, it's hard to tell which is which, but I would just say what I felt I knew. And many a time I'd be like standing beside myself going, geez, that sounds good. Where'd that come from? Literally. And now I know where it comes from. It comes from from where we all came from, and the guides that are helping me and sending me intel, as Kerry says. But she told me something at 40 years ago. She said, you were already helping people. You helped me. You helped many people. And she said, and what I remembered when I heard your podcast, because she was privy when we connected on one of the social media sites, I think it was probably Instagram or Facebook. She's on Facebook, to the podcast. Is she said, the minute I heard your voice, and I've heard this from my students too, my former students, when they hear the voice, it's coming back to them. Literally the voice carries as a form of energy. It's vibration. It's all the same stuff, just different frequencies. And so that's one, call it the gift of gab that Irish people get, but there's something about that. And I knew that intuitively, and she just basically reinforced that or validated that. So, there are many ways to use the energy, the healing energy that the universe makes available for us. And it takes some practice and skill, but there's a lot of it that is already intuitive. We all know people that are not clinicians, certainly, or healers by trade or by design or by self-admission, but you just feel better when you're around them. They're enthusiastic. Now, as we know, that word means in its origins from God, and theos, from God. It's divine energy. When you see enthusiastic people, can anyone in a room not laugh when a little kid is giggling wildly? The belly laugh of a child,
right?
Especially in church or someplace where there's a smile on everybody's face because it's infectious, but in a joyful way. And that is just part of this healing energy that's available to all of us. And one of the great sources of channeling that or connecting to it and connecting to your guides are shamanistic practices. And there are many shamanistic practices. Aboriginal shamanism, modern shamanism, Reiki shamanism. This is,
Right.
I was shocked. I found this book in some bookstore someplace, and I go, oh my God, I never knew about this. But it's a great guide to a curious beginner or just someone that's curious. I hear about this Reiki, schmakey stuff. What is this?
I just had a
You and I were
flashback of my law
probably,
enforcement
yeah.
people when you said that.
Well, yeah, where, the woo-woo stuff. Well, it's about the woo field. And look that one up, the woo field. It's a field of energy. And so we have great capacity to help each other and heal each other. The time is right with the chaos that is running rampant in society today and everyone clucking and shaking their heads. That there are a lot of beings that are coming in and are evolving here that are here to help. The light workers that are here to shed light on dark areas and illuminate. So we have all these metaphors for enlightenment and illumination and all of that. And if you want one metaphoric description of what it's like on the other side, it's all light. But the closer you get to the source of this light, which call it God, call it whatever,
right?
You have to be attuned and evolved to be able to tolerate the intensity of that light. It's like anything. You come out of a cave. So we are on the earth. We live in a spiritual cave. And all of a sudden you come out into the light and we're all blinded by it. Well, that's similar on the other side. So you have to evolve and attune yourself and learn. So whatever we are, our sense of our spiritual entity, that ball of energy or whatever it is, it's eternal. It's as curious as the universe is. The universe is a curious place. We're here to learn. It's a school.
Just got to remind people we're listening to Finding Your Way Through Therapy. I'm sitting here with Pat Rice and I'm Steve Biso. There's so many things that came up while you were talking. I'm writing notes as I go here. Now that I have video, I got to explain what I'm doing. I was thinking about, I had a happy hour, non-alcoholic, of course, with a bunch of colleagues in the Metro West area. And it was interesting when you think about the vibe and the energy in that room was so electrifying because it was the first time, I think, in 2.5 years for some that they actually went face to face and met up with individuals. And you talk about how we connect. I think that part of connection with individuals, when I look at our relationship and I look at other relationships in my life, someone said, what's the thing about Pat Rice that you connect with? I don't know. I connect with him. There's an energy that goes with that. And having a room full of people who are just connecting on not feeling so alone, counselors, like psychiatrists, coaching, there's plenty of people that were there. It's just being able to connect sometimes is not explaining why the connection is there, but rather like that's just a connection. You were talking about Kerry and you said you have a good connection with her. To me, that's what, when we ask about Reiki and how that works, I don't know why I connect with XYZ. I just connect. And sometimes it's just not, you can be very spiritual and be very curious about it. I've learned that instead of trying to find a reason why, and that's a shout out to my therapist, why ask why?
Why doesn't matter as much as how. How does it work? It works. Right. It works very well. Just access it. We're used to, this is an old trite saying, but the goal is to become a human being instead of a human doing.
Right.
And we're a very busy society now. America is essentially a workaholic environment. Everybody's working harder and harder to get more stuff and panic. Everybody panics when certain stuff becomes not available, which is why market economies make money. Well, we don't need to go there, but it's, I think you're this kindred spirit that we hear about, which is why there are so many spin-offs from 12-step mutual self-help groups, because there's something about the energy in the room. It's why people like to meditate often in groups or do yoga in groups and whatever, because there's an energy, the spirit energy builds up in these rooms. You feel better there. It's like old growth forests have a very spiritual energy to them. And they also have the highest oxygen content of any environment on Earth that isn't an oxygen tent. So there's a reason you feel better when you're in the old growth, a spiritual place. Some of the old growth in Northern California, the old growth redwood, sequoia, unbelievable places. It's the most spiritual Jurassic experience you'll have. Everything is big there. Clovers are the size of your fist, your hand, and it's amazing.
Right.
It makes you think that Gulliver must have walked through one of those when he did the thing about Brobdingnagian or whatever it is, where everything was huge.
Yeah.
But these places are sacred places, and a place where everybody does yoga and then meditates afterwards, like the Kripalu methods, and they're special places. In the land of Zoom now, in COVID and everything, I've been very conservative because I need to get a PCR to get onto a plane to go to Bermuda next week. Yeah, what a first world problem that is. So I miss the live meetings. I miss the room. I miss that energy. I miss seeing the light come into people's eyes when they start to feel better and come back to earth, and to see that. You can see it a little bit on Zoom, but it's something about the emanation. You feel it in your heart when you're in the room with it. It's a heart-centered thing and not a head-centered thing. The heart has its own consciousness. It's a remarkable organ. They can take one out of someone on the West Coast and stick it in a bucket of ice, fly it to Boston, throw it into someone's chest cavity, hook it all up, and then jumpstart it like an alternator in a car. It's just amazing. But it has its consciousness. And so I spoke to that before about someone I knew that donated their heart. So it's just remarkable stuff. And I say what my early mentors taught me and what the guides taught me, and I can get into that a little bit deeper, is that don't question, just experience. Don't wonder where Reiki energy comes from. Learn how to use it, because when you give it, you get it. It's like a hug.
Right. And Reiki energy, as I explained to many people, it's not my energy. It's the universe's energy.
No, it's part of everything. Everything has energy. Everything is made up of energy. A rock is made up of energy. There's, and as I think I said the last time, how powerful is this energy? You take one little atom that takes an electron microscope to even see a hint of it. You split that one atom and cities disappear. I mean, So, the Big Bang is not a mystery. They got a few atoms together, and whatever it was touched it off, and then all of this is happening. And I'm not smart enough to know what happens, what the end game is here, but some say it all collapses again and starts over. It's that cycle of life. The ultimate day just lasts 27 billion years or something.
Not smart enough or didn't study it enough? I would go with studying enough. Yeah. I would go with that.
Actually, I know now that someday, if that is important to me, I'll know that again. Right. But right now in this plane of existence it's not my thing. But I trust this energy implicitly. It's a part of who we are. It's a part of me. It allows me to override pain and difficulty. And most of the healers I know have had a lot of pain. This is one of the things that the helpers, the healers, I've become aware of this. I've listened to, as you, thousands and thousands of stories of unspeakable things that people have been experienced in their lives at the hands of often other people, or just bad luck. My friend Kerry Keegan, I'm going to just say her name is Kerry Keegan. And before I forget it, I don't have a copy of it. She wrote a children's book that is taking off now about her spirit guides, which are essentially whales. And you need to learn more about this woman and her work, because whales are the most extraordinary beings on the planet. They make us look insignificant at times. And of course, we human beings are eliminating them. But they are all about sound and the sound waves and communications. And she wrote a children's book about a whale named Herman. And I believe the title is Hearting with Herman.
Yes, and that You Are Not Alone is the rest of the title, actually. I'm looking it up as we speak. Magic of the internet.
So what is the title actually? Because
Hearting with Herman, You Are Never Alone, and it is by Kerry Keegan. I'm going to actually link it in my...
wonderful. Thank you so much.
I'll link it for Kerry, and...
She has a website. She's a remarkable energy healer, a remarkable human being. And, I knew that way back when. I just didn't realize how much of it. I had to evolve. And then when we both connect now, basically, we're getting excited about maybe some reconnection and some really powerful sacred stuff, probably in Ireland.
And
I won't get too far
I
ahead.
will stop you for a second because I know your wife is listening, and she's going to say, you started talking about near-death experience. You changed the subject. You didn't keep it on subject, Steve. I don't know her. I know she's a nice woman, but I want to keep you on subject like she always told me to do.
All right. So where are we going back?
You're going back to, you're talking about Kerry and the near-death experience.
Yes, she said 3, at least.
Wow.
She said she's a remarkable woman. Without telling too much of her story, it's probably common knowledge, but she's had 3. She's been the victim of 3 accidents, at least, motor vehicle type accidents in which her back was broken. And she healed herself through her own energy work and everything. One took about 10 years and one took a year. So she basically healed herself through this energetic meditation path, her own shamanism, and basically got out of a wheelchair.
Wow.
And I saw her on a swing, a video of her on a swing not so long ago, like a 4-year-old and joyful on a swing. And so this is how evolved she has become. And when you choose to come back from these places, it's because you have a sense of mission. Sometimes it's to raise children. She's raised 3 extraordinary young men, and she's visiting a couple of them. One's a professional athlete, soccer player, I think. One is a professional mountain climber. I saw a picture of him on the top of the Matterhorn. Ugh.
Wow.
And one is a businessman and very successful, and they're all extraordinary people. And she raised them essentially single-handed. So she's one of these incredible beings that it's one of the joys and privileges of my life to have survived long enough and evolved to reconnect with her. And we both know that it's not by chance when you have these reconnections that this will enhance both of our abilities to help each other and to help others. And that's part of the synergy. When people are like-minded, you talked about that kindred spirit. When people are like-minded, the blend of their energies magnifies everything and attracts other people. It's part of the law of attraction. It attracts other people of like mind, which is why you go back to basic sociology. People live in groups, and the groups are self-selecting, good and bad, healthy and unhealthy, violent and peaceful, whatever they're self-selecting, and it is energy. And I won't go too Yoda here, but the dark side of this force of energy is part of everything. And that makes people more primitive. You always de-evolve. If you look at some of these hate groups, they're going right back to caveman stuff. You pick a club up and go out and start, frankly, I'll editorialize. Some of that stuff I saw in the horror of January 6th looked like, cave people, looked like aboriginals or in the wrong, basically warring primitive tribes.
Well,
it wasn't an evolved presence in a building that was supposed to exhibit some of our evolution, hopefully.
Well, I'm going to quote Yoda in one of my favorite quotes. And for those of you who may not know, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. But when he says, fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to the dark side. And I always remind people that that's how, if we don't recognize our fears of whatever, doesn't matter what you're fearful of, it can lead you down this dark path. And it's learning that the light is available somewhere and you're able to go get it as long as you're open to it and you're willing to go get it. And it's not about caving into your fears and to hate, but finding that light, and I think that that's one of the things when people say to me in therapy, oh, I'm just not feeling it today. How about you just let in, and I don't say light because my crowd may not like light. But what about just thinking about something positive or something that's good in your life, whether it's a family member, whether it's enjoying XYZ in your life. And then people smile and I'm like, how do you feel now? And they're like, oh, a little better. I'm like, that's how you let in the light, so to speak. That's when I can put in the light analogy.
Well, you're sharing some of your enthusiasm. I was thinking this morning, I woke up with people around me talking so much. I do not read the news. I'm aware very little of current events because there's not much I can do about them. and they can be distracting. Not that I don't care if people are getting hurt and whatever. With all of the stuff that's been happening recently, the violence, is that it reminds me of Voltaire, a quote by Voltaire where he said, if you can get people to believe absurdities, you can get them to commit atrocities. You also, if you can get them to believe absurdities, you can get them to accept and become inured to atrocities. Where 1 million people die in 2 years from COVID, and we had a lot of people trying to block treatment and things like that, whatever. Right. 2 million, we lose 1 million Americans in 2 years, and it's like, oh well. And or now, Americans are, I think we kill each other with guns at the rate of about 50,000 a year. If that was a disease, they'd have a fundraising, thing every year, an annual thing. But the fact that we can accept that as a society is because we become inured to it. And so much of our society can believe absurdities. Well, what we talk about, we were talking about last night at the event, the networking thing is, how do we help? And the theme is that so many of us are busy to the power we never expected to be this busy because people are searching for something. If people can open themselves up as either wanting to be helpers or to be users of this energy, which is limitless, and the ability of your spirit guides and your guides to help you in this lifetime are limitless, but you must learn how to ask for it. So it may be a good time now to kind of shift. How about this? Pat Rice is actually shifting on topic.
I'm going to let you host now.
Okay, write the date down. This actually happened. But about these spirit guides and that aspect of shamanism, shamanism can be many things. It's essentially, in its most basic definition, as I understand it, it's seeking a connection, guidance from your spirit guides and through meditation or trance. A lot of the Aboriginal guides, including Native North Americans and First Nation people, their rituals to seek their guides or their ancestors or whatever were through peyote and mescaline and ayahuasca and Amazon and other hallucinogenic substances, or dancing, drumming, exhaustion, sweating, and these types of sweat lodge rituals. And you can do it through meditation. You can do it through self-hypnosis. That's been my path mostly. It's how I healed from most of the trauma in my early life experience, is through what would be called dissociative type of self-hypnosis. It's part of why do people dissociate and repress? It's to keep you alive, having endured and witnessed and things that would scramble your sensibility. But that's available to everybody. Right. Being psychic is available to everybody. Kids are remarkably psychic because they're surrounded by their guides. There are no imaginary friends. Those aren't imaginary to the children. We just can't see them. And so this imaginary friends metaphor evolved. No, those are their guides. Those are their spirits and their ascended beings and their spirit guides and their angels. There's many words for it. Right. Archangels, I'm kind of partial to the archangels. In the worst pain of my life, I'm petitioning Archangel Raphael to come. Raphael didn't come directly, sent my wife, who's a Reiki master, in 3 hours. This is a ruptured disc. Worst pain I've ever experienced. I thought I knew 10 out of 10 pain. No. And it's one of the things, Kerry and I talk about that, broken backs and stuff. Then my wife got home, finally. All she had to do was touch me, and half my pain went away. She touched me, and I could move. And that is, it's emotional. That is because she's attuned to this. She came home from work in Boston because she knew my state of being. And she has that ability. She practices her Reiki mostly on animals. She's an animal Reiki master. And I could do a whole podcast talking about her and what I've watched her do with deer and other things. It's a deer whisperer. But she touched me and half the pain went away so I could actually get to the prednisone thing that my doctor had prescribed. I couldn't even reach it. And so these are the things that experientially I have endured and experienced. But I had a curiosity, and because I I was able to do what you're doing, is asking someone that's had a different experience than me, what's it all about? I was put in the path of a Reiki master who was in my practice 30 years ago. And I was just curious. So I went to a couple, I think I spoke to this earlier on an earlier podcast about just getting curious with Colleen. And I haven't looked back because it's just the neatest stuff. We say a lot in all professions. Isn't it incredible when you find out that this stuff really works? The stuff that people talk about in the books, and you try it and it actually works. And there's no more powerful satisfaction when you're trying to help somebody and they in some way indicate to you that you have helped them through a difficult time. If you don't get hooked on that, you're in the wrong profession. That's the juice that keeps us going. That's why everybody was in that room last night. It's looking for resources and connections. And because we can easily, if we don't stay connected, which is why we've had this supervision group, peer group for so long, we'll lose our way because it's the dark forces that, from which we're trying to help people heal can affect us as well. It's called vicarious traumatization and other things. But we have got to keep ourselves in the good energy and charged up. Or we're no better than a cell phone with a dead battery. It's just an $800 paperweight.
Right.
And
I think that, I just want to again remind people, Finding Your Way Through Therapy, Pat Rice, Steve Beason, he's now the host of the show, but I have to put in a little plug, huh? One of the things that I wanted to throw out is that when they talk about spiritual energy, shamanistic, spirit guides, or what we do, I tell people all the time that what I do is there is some training, but ultimately it's the therapeutic alliance. It's not a training of XYZ that helped me get there. It's how I connect with the person in front of me. So when people say, what's the best therapy? I'm like, therapeutic alliance. And that therapeutic alliance, you can find that at your hairdresser. Well, for most people, not me, but for most people, or a barber, because you connect with them, they hear your life, and you just have that commonality. You talk about shamanistic stuff. You talk about spiritual guides. You talk about, I think that when you have that connection, that therapeutic alliance, and it doesn't have to be mental health, trained master's level, blah, blah, blah. Therapeutic connection is therapeutic connection. And I think that alliance is really what I think that even we have a therapeutic alliance, me and you, Pat. That's how I perceive it anyway. And it's not because you're trained in XYZ or and I'm trained in ABC. It's about how we connected. And that's the energy that I keep on coming back to all the time.
I know some of the greatest therapists I know actually cut people's hair.
Exactly.
I'm serious.
I believe it.
I have a friend, Karen, and she's been doing it a long time. She's unbelievably good at it. And she'll refer to me because she'll listen. I said, you do what I do, Karen, every day. I just don't have to cut anybody's hair. Because if someone will let someone near your face with sharp objects and everything to do your coif, and to which means a lot to some people, they trust you. And when they're trusting like that, they'll tell you almost anything. And,
right.
Because they trust you and you're a good listener as you're snipping and cutting and doing whatever you're doing. So the healers come in so many different packages. But they have one thing in common that you've alluded to, is that they can channel this loving, healing, unconditional acceptance and the ability to to help you share your pain. I tell people this all the time. Sometimes a good friend will share something with you that is a very powerful thing. And you sit there going, I don't know how they've endured this. How can anybody survive that? Because you haven't survived it yourself. I say, I'll tell people that all of the time, is that you don't have to figure out how they endure it or how someone else could have done that to them. You figure out how you can help them and listen and take care of yourself and process your confusion or your outrage or whatever. Early in my experience as a detox counselor, a woman, I'm a white guy with a pink tie on. Honest to God, you can't write this stuff. A 40-year-old white guy, brand new minted counselor in a public detox. And a woman slightly younger than me is in there, strung out on cocaine. She's a 38-year-old woman of color from Bandapan or something. And I'm trying to do a biopsychosocial on her. And part of it was to basically ask her, has your addiction cost you anything or something? Somewhat stupid.
Yeah.
I rewrote that thing the next week, that whole biopsychosocial. And she looked at me, with this tired look, tolerant look of my idiocy, and said, well, other than the fact that I traded my daughter for cocaine, no, not much. And I sat there and I said, I'm so sorry. And I said, I think we need to end this now. And she said, thank you. And she went back outside, and I put my head on my desk and wept. And the next thing I did is I went out and found my supervisor, and we sat and talked for an hour and a half about what were the mistakes. And he gave me the permission at that point in time to rewrite that biopsychosocial, because it was written well-intended, but like an idiot. I was set up, and I didn't realize it. But that poor woman, and then I had time to, before she left, to process her abject pain. And
can you explain that for those who might not know what that means?
Abject pain?
Yeah.
Excruciating pain. And okay. She did admit one thing. Is she told me exactly what that metaphor, sold my child for cocaine, meant. It wasn't what I thought it meant. It was a different experience of it, which in her mind, she had sold out her child in a way. But it was this. There's a guy on the West Coast, Paul H., who has a Buddhist site called Zen Bitch Slap. And forgive me, can be a very pejorative term to some. Forgive me if that's offensive. But it's that 2x4 upside the head, as we used to say. And that was mine, is the fact that I needed to learn a lot more about how to ask for the information I needed than to just follow the instructions of these biopsychosocials. In anyone that has ever been a junior clinician at master's or bachelor's level, you fill these forms out. It's just information. They take a history on somebody, and some of them are crafted very intuitively and very smartly, and others are just crafted in a very mindless way. And I was able to change that, but it awakened me to the fact that I knew a lot about me and my own experience at that point. But it also set me off on knowing what turned out to be another 13 years after 4 years of intensive psychotherapy, another 13 years to learn about everything that I needed to know about me, so I knew where my stuff ended and the patient's stuff began. And that's a tough line. And you make all your mistakes in the therapeutic alliance you make by crossing that line.
Right.
Or as this mentor of mine said, that the smart therapist knows what to say and the wise therapist knows when not to say it. Especially with advanced empathic stuff and sharing hunches and
right.
So it's everything. One thing I think I've been true to, and we had Nick there, one of my students last night, is that I've tried to share every one of my worst therapeutic blunders with every student I've ever had. Because we owe that to everybody. A carpenter will say, don't do this because I saw someone cut his leg off when he did that. Well, right. We're supposed to do that as well. And we can do as much damage with our words as someone can do with a chainsaw.
Absolutely.
And we have to be, we owe it to ourselves and everyone else to be very careful with words. I think the Buddha said, if you can't improve upon silence, don't.
Right.
So,
I think it was a Buddha quote.
It was a Buddha quote. Yeah. Most of my stuff I stole from Buddha. I just forgot that I read it.
But I think that what you just said is so powerful, because one of the things that I kind of remind my clients too, once in a while I'll sit back and I have an observation in my head, not the time, not the place, right time, right place, and all that. But my clients know when I say, sorry, you just tossed me a softball. I'm going to hit it out of the park. Do you want a home run or you want a single here?
Yeah. Well, it's again, you accept unsolicited feedback often isn't helpful, but right. Solicited feedback can be. I think as I'm getting myself back on topic, I want to say one last thing about shamanism and in general. The traditional shamanism is about connecting with your animal spirit guide. Right. That everybody supposedly has an animal guide that helps us in this pedestrian earth school. I frankly have tried those traditional methods to get back into the earth, if you will, and find my spirit guides. And I'm confused by it. I never really found an animal spirit, other than a raptor, probably. Raptors absolutely fascinate me.
Okay.
I find them. I've come face to face on the ground on a beach in Oregon where there's only two people on that beach, an eagle and me. And for that moment in time, when you realize how big they are, an eagle took a look at me at 6:00 in the morning, and I sat right down in the sand because for that moment I said, "I'm too big," right, to myself, because they have a look. Whoa, that apex predator look. We saw it once with a black jaguar that charged the edge of a cage once in the sanctuary where they were rehabbing them. You had that look, and you knew that if that thing came at you, you were done.
You're right.
There's an unequivocal knowledge that I'm lunch. But so I've never really found that connection to an animal spirit guide, but I have found my guides in many different meditative paths and by connection to some really extraordinary teachers and people that are very gifted and have taught me how to use my psychic abilities in the right ways as well. So I find my connection to my guides in a much more direct way. And some of them are probably what people would call traditional angelic beings. Others are just ancestors I've had, people I've known that are now back in the homeland, if you will, at the home office. It's using them. I said this every time probably I've talked with you, that the thing I would like to communicate is whether it's an archangel, whether it is a spirit guide, whether it is your grandmother, your mother, your brother, whoever is not with us now, they have the capacity to help you, but you must ask daily.
Right.
It's a daily thing, is that they will never interfere in your day, even though they can. They will never interfere in a way that would intrude or insinuate them into. They will never interfere. They will not cheat you out of your own karma. However, if we ask, they will help us in any way they can. Archangels are not overburdened. They are at a higher level because they have almost infinite capacity to help. They can just do what they can do, and there's plenty of them. Investigate them. It's really kind of interesting. A few have actually walked on Earth before, and in that way, some haven't. They've never found it necessary to come to the Earth School to take a course. Guides are available. Everyone has them. They're all available to us. And to reconnect to these guides that brought us in and protected us when we were little and taught us what they needed to teach us. It's available to everybody. And finding a path. And if you're curious, again, the Reiki shamanism, I'm not hawking the book. I don't even know where I got it, probably in Oregon. It's a way it's an overview of all of it. If you're curious, I'll say this to anybody out there, if any of this piques your curiosity, then that's an information to you.
I want to go back.
We were saying earlier that when learners are ready, teachers appear. That's Buddha. And so sometimes it's in the form of a book falls off a shelf, metaphorically, into your lap.
Right.
Someone gives you it. You run into somebody, or I reconnect with someone, and they hear a podcast and they remember what we had when we were much, much younger and less evolved. And we reconnect at a time when we both have the winter plumage. But get curious about Herman the whale, and
yeah.
Herman's heart, and it is it's a very, very powerful thing from a very, very powerful healer, Mrs. Kerry Keegan.
I just want to get back to the spirit animal one because some people say do those things exist. For me, I've always been attracted to wolves. Why? I don't know, probably some ancestry, past lives, or what have you. And I've always found that's my spirit animal in many, many ways. And so how people sometimes ask me about that spiritual animal, I said, what animal fascinates you, like you have more of a curiosity about? That might be your spiritual animal. It doesn't have to be in the traditional 12, 14 animals that sometimes people talk about. There's thousands upon thousands of different species of animals.
Sure, I would hope it wouldn't be a beetle or something, but you're always looking for that romantic. I love raptors, but it just came to me. I once did a traditional deep dive into the shamanistic meditative path to find my animal. And you know what it was? It just came back to me. An otter.
Oh, okay.
And when you think about it, my wife lives with a cartoon character most of the time, So you tell that there, but you have no idea. He looks so professional and everything like that. I live with Goofy, and whatever. But so it could very well be that is that, the otters are playful and kind and amazing, and they're energetic beings. And so I just remembered that, an otter.
Right. And I think that any type of animal that you can name, they have their place in the whole system.
Yeah.
And that's what I tell people is that even though you said a beetle, maybe it's not a beetle, but it could be a bee. It could be firefly. It could be so many other things. And we all need those animals in the world. I believe in interconnectedness, and that's how I perceive it.
Maybe really annoying people. Their guide is a mosquito or something. Just being goofy again. Forgive me.
Well, I love that. And, Pat, as we approach the hour yet again.
Oh, my goodness. Really?
Yes.
Wow.
I'm going to wrap it up here by saying that I think we have another episode in us.
I bet we do. But I never really got to, you were curious once about pharmacology and pharmaceutical stuff and natural pharmaceutical stuff and all of that too.
And I thought we'd get to it with the shamanistic stuff, but as usual, me and you just go
we scratched the surface of the shamanistic stuff, so that'd be a good place for chapter 2 at some point in the future, near future.
Well, that means episode, I don't know which one, but hopefully 6. What would that be?
That's right. You got the sequencing thing going here.
Yeah, it would be 65, I believe, would be the next episode you got to be on in order to make
it. I'm going to put in a plug.
Yes.
I'm going to ask her, but you should get Kerry on to do one of these.
Well, I have a slight idea about this, and we'll talk about it off air. But I just wanted to say thank you, Pat. And from the bottom of my heart, not only are, I joked around in regards to, the being the most popular episodes, and that's why I have to have you back constantly. I can't think of a better way for us to continue to connect. And I think that this connection also feeds other people, including Kerry. I've had a lot of feedback about how good energy we have together. And so for me, it's not only a podcast episode, but it's a great way to connect with you, Pat, because to me, it's just an intimate conversation that people are privy to.
Well, thank you, my dear friend. It's a privilege for me as well. And it's just fun, Steve. You make it fun. But I'll tell you what Kerry said last night. She said, thank you. She's a very, very humble person. And it would be interesting. I'd love to hear that. So I'm shamelessly selfish here in that regard. But
well, thank you, Pat.
Thank you.
And
thank you so much.
I'll talk to you off air, obviously, but
okay,
I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thanks again, Steve.
Well, this concludes episode 54 of Finding Your Way Through Therapy. Again, Pat Rice, thank you so much. As usual, we didn't stay on subject, but we did talk about a few important things. And after the interview, I talked to him off air about an idea for our next podcast, which obviously he's going to come back for season 6. So looking forward to that. And if you want any links to Pat Rice's Instagram and stuff, please go to the show notes. Episode 55 will be again with returning guests. This time it will be Cara Terrell and Bill Dwinells. We're going to talk about crisis work. We're actually going to take a little bit of a different approach to it, and I'm sure that it's going to be entertaining, so I hope that you can join us for episode 55. Please like, subscribe, or follow this podcast on your favorite platform. A glowing review is always helpful. And as a reminder, this podcast is for information, educational, and entertainment purposes. If you are struggling with a mental health or substance abuse issue, please reach out to a professional counselor or therapist for consultation.